One of the most successful films from the year 2019 was the movie Marriage Story, starring Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson. And while this movie achieved much acclaim and success, it also highlights a lot of key events that may take place within people's relationships in marriage. In this episode, we're going to share 3 key lessons that we drew from the movie and ways that you can apply them in your marriage moving forward. Let's go. Hey friends, welcome to the Marriage Inside Out podcast, where we teach couples how to become mission focused, learning to work together as a team to build a solid foundation for their household. I'm Khalil, and this is my wife, my lady of the house. Yes, you all may know her as AJ, but I call her Adrian. Let's make some noise for the lady of the house.
Yes. So glad you guys are joining us today. It's going to be a good one.
Yes, a good one indeed, because we are going to be doing a movie review for the first time, right?
Yes. We love movies, but haven't really sat down to share with you guys some insights that we can glean from a lot of different movies as it relates to marriage. So.
Yep, exactly. And in this particular episode, we're going to be talking about a movie from 2019 called Marriage Story.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent movie.
Excellent movie. And if you have not seen this movie, it's available on Netflix, or you could rent it from somewhere else. And it is important that you know that we may dive into some details as it relates to the movie itself. So go ahead and hit that pause button if you haven't seen it and you don't want a spoiler, and then come back after you see it for the discussion.
Yes, definitely do that. Because we're gonna get into it a little bit here.
For sure.
We're not gonna go over every single thing, but we're gonna get into some stuff.
For
sure.
So
just to give you all some background about the movie. So it's written and directed by Noah Baumbach. It stars Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver.
Mm-hmm.
And it was nominated for tons of awards. Very successful movie. Nominated for Best Picture in the Academy Awards.
Yeah.
And just a really cool work of art and a really cool storyline.
Right. But when you hear Marriage Story, right, as the name of a movie,
right.
I know for me what comes to mind is like some Disney fairy tale happily ever after thing. And
Exactly.
And it's such an interesting kind of play on words, because ultimately the movie is about a marriage story, but really at the end of the marriage.
Right, exactly. And so in this specific couple, their names are Charlie is the husband and Nicole is the wife, obviously played by Scarlett Johansson. And so they're both in the kind of theater and film industry.
Mm-hmm.
So the husband is a stage director,
Mm-hmm.
and he directs plays, and his wife is one of his actors. She actually acts in his plays. And they have a child.
Yes.
He's like 9 or 10 years old.
Yeah, I think he might be 8, but yeah.
Right, 8,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it kind of like, Adrian was saying, it just chronicles all of the events and interactions
Mm-hmm.
leading up to their eventual split.
Right.
And it's interesting because in the story, it starts off showing how they try to do it very respectfully, and
Right.
they try to be very amicable throughout the process,
Mm-hmm.
yet after a certain point in time, it just spirals out of control, and it really gets kind of nasty, and you start to see how when the system and like the law system gets involved, it just can get ugly.
Right.
But they kind of make amends at the very, very end of the movie, and again, it's just really shows what can happen in a lot of different situations.
Right. And I love that the movie really leaves a lot of things up to question at the end. And it shows the humanity, honestly, of each person in the marriage, and how they're navigating and dealing with the emotions that come into play, and their desire to still love one another, but what that looks like. So that's really what made the movie itself so powerful, because I think when we start talking about marriage itself, oftentimes we only kind of stay in that wedding day, everything's great, you're having kids, you're building wealth, all is well. And that's just not reality. So it's important that we kind of dive into this discussion.
Right, exactly. And you know, we love, just like we said, love watching movies, and we love just learning things from different examples.
Right.
And we feel like, you know, in movies and in books, like there are lessons to be learned. And so, you know, what we want to do is we want to highlight just a few key themes and lessons that really stood out to us, and how we can apply them, how you can apply them in your life and in your marriage, and how we all can. And we know that everyone is coming from a different place.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, we want to acknowledge the fact that, you know, some of these types of experiences are very real for certain people.
Right.
And so we just want you all to know that we're just striving, we're not trying to dive too deep into the topic of divorce itself, but rather striving to come from the lens of, okay, how can we help to preserve the health of marriage?
Right.
Because we want your marriage to thrive.
Yes.
And that's something that, you know, we are just big proponents for, is we want your marriage to thrive. We want you to have a healthy and successful marriage. And so that's kind of the lens that we're striving to come from with in sharing this.
Exactly. So so dive into the discussion with us no matter what stage of life you're in. And just like Khalil said, even if you have been through a situation similar to this and you're kind of on the other side and trying to figure out what it looks like to have a healthy marriage moving forward, we believe what we're going to share is going to be value added for you as well.
Right, exactly. So let's go ahead and dive in.
Yes. Let's go.
All right. So the first big lesson or theme that we want to point attention towards is just how important it is for us to make sure that we just check ourselves when it comes to our pride and our desire to be in control.
Yeah.
So one of the things that the movie shows is there's a scene where, you know, they're kind of talking about they're having like this kind of inner monologue, or like they wrote about one another.
In a counseling session.
Yeah. And then one of the things that the wife, Nicole, speaks about her husband is that, you know, he wanted to be in control. He likes being in control. And that's one of the things that she ends up citing when she meets with her attorney, is that, you know, he kind of always wanted things his way. And then on the flip side, later on, you see that the husband, Charlie, makes the same claim about her. You wanted to move, you know, basically blah, blah, blah. And so, but I think that's so true because, you know, that can happen to any of us, right?
Right. I mean, because in marriage, right, we're bringing together individuals that have their own nuances and desires, and even the way you think certain things should be displayed. You know, there's always that joke going into marriage, like, make sure you know where they put their toothbrush, because that might make, you know, might ruin the whole thing for you. But it's like just that ability to pick your battles, if you will, and realize that they're not really battles. It's like, how can we compromise? How can we figure out, okay, maybe I really do like arranging this way, or I really believe we should go eat at this restaurant, but is now a time to get into back and forth about that, or is that something that I can, you know, push aside? But within that, it is hard, because if you become the person that in the marriage that is always pushing those choices to the side, that's how that resentment builds up.
Exactly. Yeah. I can say that about myself, even, you know, just being transparent, is that I find myself at times like, I feel things should be this way.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you mentioned the whole like toothbrush thing, but we do have some of those moments where I come in the kitchen or I'm like, man, I thought that was, and I'll take it and I'm like, can we keep it right? You know, can we keep it right here? But that's, and we're laughing about it, obviously, and we do joke about it. But it's real though, and even not in just some of those small things, but even just other things, such as, you know, if I feel like you should be acting a certain way because you were that way the day before or last week, or I feel like, you know, like we're each human, you know, and as we go through our daily experiences, we react to things differently, even throughout the course of time. And so, you know, to place that kind of that unnecessary burden of, you know, me trying to control you, and then on the flip side, me staying and standing in my pride of, you know, I'm not willing to you know, lay down or
change,
exactly
adjust.
Adjust. Yeah. And so I think that's certainly something that you see in the movie, as well as obviously that reflects in who we are.
Yeah, exactly. Cause for self-reflection.
Right, exactly. So point number 2, which I think this is a really big one. So the wife, played by Scarlett Johansson, she was an actress, and she had this desire to, the family lived in New York, but she wanted to move back to LA, and she wanted to take a role in a TV sitcom.
Yeah, and that was kind of where she started her career.
Exactly, that was where she was from as well. Yeah. That was her home, kind of her hometown.
Yeah.
And but the husband was just kind of totally against that. Yeah. And one of the things that really kind of drove her to her point was she felt like all of her dreams and aspirations were she had to kind of like lay them down. And it really made us think about just the importance of making sure that in marriage that we still empower and support one another within our personal journeys of growth.
Yep.
Because though we are married and we are a unit, we are a team, you're still a person.
Right.
You're still an individual in a sense. I'm still a person. I'm still an individual. You have your own, ambitions and goals and desires, same way I do. And so, in the movie, that was kind of one of the big breaking points, was that the wife felt like she wasn't able, like she was living in her husband's shadow.
Yep.
And I feel like, I feel like I got to say this as a man, me looking at it from that lens, like I feel like that oftentimes happens in terms of the man's vision and desires and aspirations kind of swallowing up what the wife's identity, and the identity kind of gets lost. I definitely want to hear what you have to say about that.
And I mean, even if you think about when children come into the picture, and whoever chooses, makes the choice in most cases to stay home with the children, and that is a choice at a point, but I believe that from there, sometimes there's this assumption that for the next 18 years, that's their role, if that's what you guys decided as a couple, instead of doing that consistent evaluation from both sides. How are you feeling? Is there anything I can help you with? How do we need to adjust? Do we need to transition and put the kids in school, and do you, so that you can pursue something that really fulfills you personally? That constant evaluation, and not feeling like the choice you've made is just a sentence, right? Like a sentence. I say that like a jail sentence, like something that you have to deal with for the rest of your life. Because, like you said, Nicole, in the movie, she chose to get married. She chose to move to New York, but as that growth process happened, she wanted to further her career in Los Angeles, and was not necessarily, didn't feel the buy-in and the freedom. There was a lot of missed promises and overlooked opportunities when Charlie mentioned, like, sure, we'll do it eventually, but there was never a clear yes, we're going to be strategic, or no, maybe we'll take half of the year in New York and half of the year in LA, and this is how we're going to compromise both of our desires to grow.
And that's big, because things like moving, it's never really an easy thing, right? But I think we got to be willing to, I'm gonna say it that way, we got to be willing to make those sacrifices and those compromises, understanding that I want to make sure that you become everything that the Lord has called you to be and do, and I have to be aware of that. And then vice versa. It's kind of like a book that we read called You and Me Forever by Francis Chan. We'll probably do a review. And his wife Lisa, like, he kind of talks about that in terms of making sure that within marriage that we are helping kind of push one another and supporting one another to be all that we've each been called to be. And I think what I really wish would have happened within Marriage Story movie is that I wish, it's funny, like, you kind of like see the character and wish you could give him a pep talk.
I wish I was their best friend.
Right.
And
like, I wish I could, like, if I could have talked to Charlie, I would have been like, bruh, like, I know you don't like LA, because he didn't like LA. Like, he didn't want to move there, and New York was his home. But it's like, bruh, like, can you just not, your wife has been acting in all of your plays. She acted in all of his plays. And she even said that she wanted to direct, but she said that he always kind of shot it down whenever she asked. Like, bruh, like, you can at least move to LA, at least for a little bit. Just give it a shot. You know, let her have her shine. And I think that's something, I'm speaking to the husbands now, like, I need to make sure that you have your shine, because as a wife, you should be shining, you know. And I'll just, that's a whole nother conversation. We'll get into that discussion another time. But making sure that, you know, we are not, each of us aren't swallowing the other person up. It's not, this is my marriage and my vision and everything. And you just kind of got to, you know, fall in line and deal with it. But no, like, how can I make sure that I'm building you up, empowering you? How can I make sure that I'm in humility considering you before myself, Philippians 2, and, you know, not just looking out for my own interests, but also for your interests. You know, and so.
No, that's powerful. That's powerful. And again, it goes both ways as well, right? Because it's easy, even as women, as wives, to get caught up in what we have going and how we desire for our husbands to be, and no longer check in, just have these vain expectations of what they should be doing, and really limiting, you know, their opportunity, maybe because of insecurities, maybe because of just uncertainty. So I think that just being able to understand and constantly converse, which is kind of getting to our next point about what that looks like, is so vital.
Right, exactly. And so on that note, the third point, or the third lesson, is really just, I know we say this often and it sounds cliche, but we just have to communicate consistently with one another. And in particular, I want to highlight the importance of asking each other questions, because oftentimes when we think of communicating, we think of just talking,
right,
or just sharing, but no, like asking one another questions. So one of the things in the movie that really kind of led to their eventual split up was that you can tell they had all of these bottled up kind of emotions and feelings and frustrations and everything that we kind of just laid out to you. Like, they kept them from one another. And it's almost like shaking up that soda can. You know, you just keep it bottled up. And they would share their frustrations with their lawyers. And it was almost as if they let the lawyers speak for them instead of them coming to one another. And then when they would come to one another, it was like an explosion. Like, I mean, there's this one scene in the movie where they have this vicious argument. Don't get me wrong, it was one of the best acting, like some of the best acting in the whole movie, but they have this vicious argument, and you just hear all of these things kind of coming out at once, like, well, you used to do this, and I used to feel this way, and blah, 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 but it's because they never took that time to address those things when they were probably still small things. You know, they made mountains out of molehills. Right. We actually talked about that in a communication video once. But like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's communication is hard, and I think that's why it's easier to look over the necessity of doing it frequently. It causes, or there's a certain level of vulnerability and transparency that is uncomfortable. I mean, we even had a moment earlier today where you practice exactly what you're preaching right now, right? Where I was feeling very anxious and very overwhelmed, and I honestly couldn't verbalize why. So he asked me why, and I said, I don't know. I don't know why I feel this way, right? But instead of stopping there, he's like, let's try to dig in, like,
trace the steps.
Trace the steps. Started asking me questions about, well, how did this maybe affect you? How about this? And from that, I was able to open up and actually articulate to him, yes, it was this that is actually causing me to feel this anxiety. And then we were able to move towards solutions so that I could feel better, right? So that I felt uplifted. And it actually, it didn't necessarily, it wasn't a situation that had anything directly to do with him and our marriage itself. Right. It was something external to that. But for us to be able to work through it together, because that attitude, that anxiety, those feelings, that emotions I'm having affect how we interact in other regards. I just think was a great example of what it looks like to ask inquisitive questions and lean into the conversation when the time is right.
Right, exactly. Because I think that's something that we sometimes just don't do whenever there is a challenge or a conflict or a frustration that comes up, is that instead of asking questions, we just kind of jump to a conclusion.
Right.
And, or jump to assumptions. Yeah. And then that starts the cycle of broken communication, which we've talked about before.
Exactly.
But yeah, we see that, in Charlie and in Nicole's relationship was that, they kind of had these assumptions built up in their minds about what the other person, who they were or what they were feeling.
Yeah.
And, it just led to, again, just the further shaking up of that can. But yeah, I think that's even just a very good, simple practice. Like for me to just ask you like, hey baby, how you doing?
Yeah.
Like, no, really, like, how are you? How are you mentally, physically, emotionally? Like, how are you doing right now?
Yeah.
And just to listen, just to be willing to listen, be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, right? You know?
100%.
And then I think another thing to draw from that is, obviously there are going to be times where we have disagreements or maybe frustrations, but to have the maturity to know that when we have those disagreements, to not attack one another's character.
Yes.
I feel like that's a big one. That's almost like a whole nother point in and of itself.
That is a whole nother point.
But that's a temptation. Like, it really is tempting. Yeah. Like, and again, we see it in the movie. Yeah. Like, and again, it's a pretty hilarious scene. Like, you can just go watch the argument scene, and that will probably that will just say a lot to you. But they just start kind of unloading on each other. Even in other scenes, they start kind of really taking shots at one another personally, under their breath. Like, you were this, or you were did like. And I think that's sometimes what happens when we have disagreements or conflicts, is that it goes from addressing the conflict or the issue to taking shots at one another. Exactly.
And that is so important, and why we really talk about how you can translate from a broken communication cycle to, one that is positive and uplifting and encouraging. Because when you take those arguments, those cheap shots off the table, then you do get two solutions eventually as you converse. But if you're taking those shots, you're gonna hit places and you're making bruises on the other person that are gonna be sore for a while. And if those bruises aren't addressed over time, they're gonna build even more resentment and even more anger. So that's definitely something that we try to practice as well, to make sure that let's look at the issue, right? What is happening? And then let's try to dig deeper into the issue itself, but not address the other person's character, not to defame their character in that process.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. I think we have some good friends, the Bells, that they actually gave us some good little piece of advice in terms of communicating. They say one of the things that they do is, if they have like a disagreement or argument, is when they talk, they hold hands. Yeah. Because they said that it's harder to say something hurtful to the other person if you're holding hands and looking at one another while you're talking. So even just that simple, body connection point. It's like, oh wow, that's cool. I might have to try that. So y'all feel free to try that one out there, and definitely props to them on that.
Yeah, so, that's good.
Yeah, awesome. Are there any final thoughts that you have personally, as we kind of begin to wrap up, about the movie, or just about anything marriage related itself?
I think for those of you guys that have seen the movie, there may be certain emotions that rise up within it. It is a very emotional film.
Yeah, it is.
And would just encourage you to, take part in the film, understand it, but to not lose hope that the solution at the end, as you're currently in marriage, has to end in the same way the movie did. Exactly. We hope that by listening to this at the stage you are, that you would be able to do a personal evaluation and then an evaluation in your marriage as to what a solution focus for marriage step might be, whether that is going to counseling, whether that is just opening up about something you're going through with another trusted couple, whatever that looks like for you. I would just say we would encourage you to take that step first whenever you can. Of course, disclaimer as well, if there is, abuse or intense, severe things happening, please get help. So I do want to say that. However, encourage those of you that are maybe just in a disagreement phase to take those necessary steps to grow together.
Yeah, no, that's really good. One of the last things I want to say is just remember why you got married.
Yeah.
Remember why you got married. Remember why you committed to one another. I think we forget those little things, right? What drew us to one another, what it is that we see within one another that we really do respect and admire and love. Very powerful scene is at the very beginning of the movie, and they're in their counseling session as they're about to go through a divorce, but their counselor is trying to help them remember the good in one another, and so they each write these letters about their spouse, about one another, and in the letter they write about all of the things that they enjoy and like about their spouse. Yeah, it's a very powerful scene in the movie because you hear it and you're like, wow, why are they having issues? It's like what's going on, but it's just a reminder that sometimes we forget the little things. We forget what brought us together. We forget our foundation, what it is that we value.
That's good.
And so, I definitely just want to encourage everyone out there watching, listening, even those of you all, maybe if you're single currently and you're, looking towards marriage, but just remember why it is that you're getting married and just remember the foundation. Yeah. Have a foundation. You got to have a solid foundation, obviously. You got to have it built on rock. And just remember that it's good to learn. Like, we have to constantly be learning. One of the things we talked about in just the last episode, which you can check out if you missed it, but marriage is this constant process where we have to unlearn things, relearn things, and then just learn new things altogether. So that's unlearning maybe some habits that we've built that no longer are effective. Yeah. And then we have to relearn maybe some old things that we let fall by the wayside. And then we just have to learn some new things altogether that we never learned to keep growing, because it's an everyday process.
Yes, for sure.
It's work, but it's a good work.
A great work.
Yes. Well, yes. Hope you all enjoy Marriage Story. If you haven't checked it out, again, we highly encourage you to. All right, friends. So as we wrap up, our question of the day for you is, have you seen the movie Marriage Story? And if so, what did you think of it? What was maybe a key lesson that you learned from it that you hope to apply in your life in some way? We would love to know in the comments below.
Yeah, and whether this is your first time listening or tuning in on YouTube, welcome. We're so grateful to have you. We would love if you would go ahead and subscribe, ding that notification bell so you can stay up to date. And if you are joining us from any of our audio sources, go ahead and head over to marriageinsideout.com, where we have several resources, including a free goal-setting guide for you to go through with your spouse so you can stay mission-focused.
Yes, and we want to thank you all again for tuning in. And until next time, remember, your marriage has a mission, and what the Lord has brought together, let nothing and no one separate. Love God and love one another, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.